Yeah, well, welcome, guys, and thanks for being here. It's just us cats tonight, which is great. That's fine. Hopefully some people get this on the recorded version, so welcome either way, whether you're here live or you're watching this in the recorded version. Pat yourself on the back for taking a moment to take care of yourself. This, little segment that we incorporated into the metabolic reset was really designed more around, like, for you guys, if you have questions, riffing, ideas, sharing, I can fill in some, content from what we've done already and support that. Things that might be useful or beneficial to support your efforts. But, open the floor up to anyone that wants to ask questions or share, or maybe even share what their experience has been so far. I find that to be really helpful for others, and that idea that we're in it together.
It's a little bit better this week than last week. Kind of, I don't know if the body's adjusting to the routines and stuff like that. I don't feel as empty as I did last week.
So energy's back a little bit.
Yeah, I played basketball yesterday. It was better, doing that. So, so it's just, kind of turned a corner. One question I have is I'm seeing a lot about cacao beans, the CACAO. They're chocolate beans, and I've seen several brands being advertised, whatever, and there's no caffeine and no sugar. It's basically like, instead of coffee grounds, it's these beans that are ground, and you can put a French press with boiling water, but it's supposed to have some other benefits, whatever going on. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, sure. Cacao beans, in some circles, it's considered a superfood. There are antioxidants for sure, and nutrients and minerals in cacao beans. There are also some anti-nutrients. So you have like both sides of that equation. I'm a fan. People have used cacao for more than centuries, thousands of years, and certainly medicinally, in candy too. But what you're describing, it could offer some benefits if you want to experiment with them. I'm a fan. Cow nibs, they can give you kind of a boost of energy, and for sure there are antioxidant properties in their polyphenols and other antioxidants that are found to be in there, and they've been found to be anti-inflammatory. I think experimenting for yourself and tasting it is a good idea. You can get used to them. They're a little bitter sometimes when it's just the cacao, but you're not getting any of that added sugar.
Yeah, because it's more like a dark chocolate.
Yeah, I've never tried it the way you described it, putting it into a French press. That sounded interesting, making a little elixir.
Yeah, I saw an ad for that the other day.
You did? You had an ad for it. Have you done that before, Dan? Or
I haven't. I'm a big fan of chicory, though, as a replacement for coffee. So I get the instant version powder from Amazon, and I use that in the afternoons and evenings instead of drinking coffee. And it's delicious and kind of rich like coffee, but it has some good prebiotics in it. I don't know of any other medicinal aspects of it, but it tastes good.
Yeah, that's right, because chicory is really a starch. It has a starch element to it, so it's a prebiotic. I think that cacao also has a prebiotic element to it.
That makes sense.
Comes from a bean. They roast the bean and then break it up. And I forgot the compound that gives you that is kind of like a caffeine. It's not caffeine, but it has a stimulant element to it. But I believe you don't get a crash from it like you potentially can get with coffee.
So it doesn't block the adenosine receptors, or
I think that's why, right? It doesn't get active. But I'm a fan. I like cacao. We have cacao in the house, and I haven't had it in a while, but sometimes you just chew on the nibs. My daughter likes them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just looking for, some alternative drinks just to get some variety.
Mhm.
Um,
And do you drink coffee?
yeah, I drink 1 cup of coffee every morning. I don't drink any more than that.
Have your cup and go.
Yeah.
Are you
Well, I actually stay because I'm retired, so
oh, okay. Well, there
I
you
don't go anywhere.
go. How about teas?
Yeah, there's different herbal teas I've done. When I had an upper respiratory infection, I was on a river cruise. It was in December. They had chamomile tea with lemon and then also honey
Mhm.
is what the concoction they put together that was helpful um, with that. So yeah, I'll drink, various teas.
Yeah. So another thing, something that you could incorporate into your kind of menu of drinks is mineral waters. So natural occurring mineral waters. These are, the water that we drink from the tap, and even if we're purifying it, we're really drinking kind of dead water. We're removing all of the mineralization. Back in the day when we drank from streams and so forth, we did get minerals. That was one of the elements that we would get just because they're running over rocks and geological structures. And I think there's value when you can get some mineral water and remineralize. And a lot of us, we like to put a pinch of salt in the water, lemon, which we kind of talked about. And one of the reasons is to remineralize it. And actually it's easier for our bodies to hydrate cells with that. So I think that's something you could try. A squeeze of citrus in there. You can get the still or the gas versions. I like Gerolstein water, and they've done a lot of testing on these waters. So there aren't any heavy metals or garbage in them.
Yeah, the one waters I don't drink sparkling water. The taste has never appealed to me
Sure.
with that. So usually I'm drinking flat waters.
Yeah, they have flat mineral water. And they filter it in a way where they don't remove the mineralization from the water. So there could be some good value there. I think that's important. Our cells, most of our tissue is water filled, and all of our tissue is water filled actually, but providing good sources. That can also help with satiation. One of the reasons that we get full or you feel satiated is there's sensors in your belly that actually measure just pressure, right? And so you fill up and there's pressure, and staying hydrated can keep a little bit of that positive pressure. Calories in, calories out aren't accurate. That's not an accurate thing, but yeah, you can overeat. And that's one way to maybe, check in with your hunger, is staying hydrated. And plus it's good. Even a 10% dehydration can affect muscle contraction, energy, focus very easily. And for a while, I think a lot of people, are walking around with their little containers of water all the time. It seems to have kind of waned a little bit, and maybe even over drinking. And without the kind of minerals in the water, we're kind of past a lot of that water. It's not bad for the renal system, but you can flush out other things that are beneficial too sometimes when you're not hydrating or not getting as much of the value of the liquid that we're taking in. You're also going to get about 30% of your hydration from food. If you think about it, if you're eating real fresh food, unprocessed food, so vegetables, fruits, even meat, it's loaded with water. A steak, if you dehydrate it, it becomes much smaller, but about 30% of the hydration we get comes from the food that we eat.
I generally keep a glass of water on a table that I pass by a lot, and that just makes sure that I'm regularly drinking water.
Yeah, take a little sip.
Yeah.
And also being mindful. This is where mindfulness can help a lot with what we're eating, is just noticing, being aware, noticing, thirst. We have a pretty sophisticated system that's supposed to signal hunger and thirst. It's really positive for survival, that we're taking care of ourselves. I've found over the years that so many people are in their heads all the time. They're really not embodied. They're not listening to these subtle signals that are being sent to you and trying to cue you in. And
But I've
so just
also heard
noticing.
that sometimes if you're hungry, to drink a glass of water. And if after that you're still hungry, then you are hungry, where,
Yeah.
Sometimes that will, take your, hunger worry away.
Yeah, we might interpret our thirst signal for a hunger signal, but that makes sense too when you think that our bodies get about 30% of their hydration from food, and so that's also a way that our bodies are hydrating, is by eating.
Can I ask a question about, at the end of the 3 weeks, where's all this going?
Well, it's hopefully kind of opened up a bigger awareness in your habits and things that are working for you, little changes that might have a positive impact, and that you'll carry them on into beyond this little reset, where it's kind of a bright moment where we're reminding ourselves of what we want and our habits, and then maybe getting introduced to new things, and then having that opportunity to incorporate them into a lifestyle. So I think that's really the goal, is that we just take greater awareness of our health and actions that we can take to support it. Hopefully, like with the Whole30, one of the biggest goals out of Whole30 was just to shift towards real foods and remove processed and especially sugar and sugary things. That was one of the motivations of the folks that started it, but it was really to get back to real food, realizing that real food is delicious, it's available, that we don't have to rely on processed foods as part of our diet. And I think that's a lot of what we're trying to do here, and that you take this forward. And, even if you're eliminating some things and you reintroduce, let's say we've eliminated dairy in this 3 weeks, or been light with the dairy, as you reintroduce them, you could notice, does that cause any distress, or am I pretty good? I don't know if anyone is actually doing the AIP version. They may have removed the eggs or the nuts. And these are allergens that a lot of folks have. And that AIP protocol is actually being used by mainstream medicine now. I was just talking to a friend whose mom was experiencing intestinal distress, and they put her on AIP. And so she's going to be on AIP for a month, and then they'll reintroduce foods to see what's going on with her intestines. And so that's really the goal. What do you think? What does this mean to you? Is this you tell me in your words, what are you hoping to get out of this?
I think it's just, I need to lose weight in the midsection. And I think what this does is it just finally puts me on a path to kind of refocus to this and make it, a priority, so I can start doing that. I mean, I don't want to do crazy fad diets or anything. I think my husband's lost 20 pounds, and a lot of it has been, portion control. I mean, we both cook a lot, so we don't get a lot of processed foods. And so I think that, part of it, we talk, about being active, being outdoors all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, kind of partnering with, eating kind of, raw, healthy foods, portion size and activity. I mean, it's kind of the key in the end. I mean, we have a rowing machine in our basement. So, I go down there, and do that for some exercise. Depending on the days, I may go down 3 times, 4 times, whatever. It's just, it's in the basement, but it's only like 10 steps to get to. So it's just something easy to do that doesn't take a lot of time.
Sure. Okay, cool. I want you to think, when you said these fad diets, so, for a long time, and I don't know if we talked about we hadn't talked about the food pyramid in the first one. We'll talk a little bit about this next Sunday. But a lot of diets, a lot of the dietary advice, what a lot of people think is the right diet, you know, this many servings of fruits and vegetables, etc. These are kind of industry driven things. They're not really diets. And what a lot of people might call a fad diet may actually be more natural diet compared to our biological ancestral physiology, if that makes sense, in the foods that are around. I mentioned, I think that 80% of the food in the supermarket didn't exist 35 years ago. And so the food industry has hijacked the messaging, and they've done it through actually controlling the American Dietetics Association, the USDA, are really industry driven. And USDA really came out of World War II, and we had these surplus stocks. And that's where we got the massive servings of grains, for example. And historically, humans didn't eat a ton of grain. Hunter-gatherers, until we became agrarian, and we actually got shorter, our brains got smaller, and this is in the anthropological record. And so what might be a fad is more of kind of a marketing thing than really accurate. So eating real foods, I think that's not a fad, that's real. That's always been around. Yeah. Michael Pollan, a great writer, he was a professor at UC Berkeley for a long time, is really interested in food and talking about the history of food and so forth. And he had some little isms that he liked to use, you know, that your great grandparents eat the food that your great grandparents ate. That's real food. Don't eat food that makes health claims, right? That has labels that say things. Don't eat food that come from a box or a window.
Yeah. Well, your grandparents got their food out of their gardens. Everybody had gardens.
So their gardens and their pasture and their neighbor's pasture, you know,
and their chicken coop.
The chicken coop. That's they ate food.
Well,
you know?
I grew up on a dairy farm, so
yeah,
you
it
know.
wasn't super complicated.
No.
Yeah. Something I could add to this conversation a little bit, since
Please.
reset is partly about metabolism, right? There's a fantastic book called Metabolical by Dr. Robert Lustig. Recently, and it does a really great job at breaking down, you know, the functions of the cell and the mitochondria, and how processed foods and sugars have really affected the health of our cells, and it contributes so much to the disease and obesity and you know, insulin sensitivity and or desensitivity. All the problems we're really seeing in our culture right now comes down to these foods that you're talking about, and these rules that were created by the big agricultural companies, and everything you're talking about is in that book, and he really breaks it down really well into the process of how that happened and what we can do about it, maybe to shift that. But it's very educational, just about cellular health. So that I definitely recommend reading that if you would like the science side.
Yeah, and Robert Lustig is very legit. He is a physician researcher. He was in charge of pediatric obesity at the University of California, San Francisco.
Yeah,
this is a very legitimate mainstream, you know, quote unquote mainstream guy, but he's been an advocate for years now on this issue, and a lot of it, you know, coming from the corruption of the food industry. And he gets into that, but he's a legitimate, very powerful, knowledgeable science on obesity. And it really is that destruction of these natural mechanisms through external factors and just food abundance and junk food abundance that's around. Then just over consuming, like he's very much like, you don't want to eat a bunch of bread. You don't want to eat bread really in general. It's sugar. You definitely don't want to drink soda. You don't want to drink juice. You know, a 32 ounce, you know, cold press fruit juice has about 288 grams of sugar. That's a cup and a quarter of sugar. And that's with no sugar added.
So people think it's healthy, right? But it's all broken down and released. So it doesn't get slowed down at all by the fibers. It's just straight into your bloodstream.
Right into the bloodstream, and it zooms, but an industry has promoted that as being healthy.
Yeah.
Right? And then if you look at even just from the economics of it, what crops are subsidized by the federal government? it's soy, it's corn and wheat. And we've been doing that for a long time. That was post World War II, where all of a sudden we had an abundance, and they were actually paying farmers not to grow things. They genetically modified the wheat kernel head, and it has many more little kernels than it did even in the 1940s, because they wanted to protect it against rot. But they never tested to see what happened in human beings when they ate it, if it was going to have any kind of an adverse effect or a positive effect. And yeah, you can digest it and stuff, but the downstream byproduct is, like Dan was saying, is we've really mucked up these metabolic mechanisms in our body that are elegant. And something that you're describing, that your energy is better this week. Well, that's kind of the clearing of the inefficiency that a lot of us have when we're eating, when we're sugar burners, right? When our bodies are prioritizing that because we're getting a lot of it and it has to actually get it out. And I think, I explained early on that mechanism of weight gain. Most of, your body mass is going to be the food that you eat. Now, exercise is part of it. We don't burn calories off like it's been described, and most people, how they I think yes, we'll use, for example, what I think is happening for you now is you're becoming a little more efficient when you're playing basketball. And if you're doing that without eating, it really taps your stored energy, which is there for a reason. And it easily releases energy as we need it. Because when we break down stored body fat, we are also making glucose molecules at the same time. And so all these elegant systems come together and keeping us alive. If calories in, calories out was accurate, and a calorie is a calorie, which most physicians are trained in this. Most physicians have no business giving any advice on nutrition because they have no training in it. There's supposed to be 30 contact hours in medical school on nutrition. There's only one university that does that, and that's Tulane. Tulane Medical School has actually stepped up and is offering that. And the way they've actually framed it is they give them cooking classes. They actually learn to cook fresh foods. And I thought that was actually a brilliant idea.
It's interesting.
Yeah, get the hands on there, but they're actually getting the contact hours, which nobody else is. I have so many friends that are physicians. Yeah, I got like one class, and or it was a lecture in a class, not even a class, and it might have been on biochemistry or something, and they talk a little bit about food. What do they use? They use the dietary guidelines from the USDA as the framework, which are already broken, and so they're starting from a false premise, and so everything they learn from that is not good. And so what's happening for you is, I think that you're loosening up your metabolic flexibility. That's the term that's used. Now, we have the ability to use different substrates, the term, but these are basically fats. We can even use proteins and carbohydrates or sugars that we can use for fuel. And our body's supposed to be able to easily, flexibly, based on what's around. Think about hunter-gatherers. Hey, what's around right now? We were able to actually use these efficiently to survive. And we didn't always have access to food. So if it was calories in, calories out, we'd all be dead. No humans would be alive. We have elegant systems. And for example, like fat, a normal weight human being stores over 100,000 calories in body fat. This is a normal weight human being. We only store about 3,000 calories combined in our liver and our muscles in stored energy, and those exhaust pretty quickly. So, our liver has a systemic release, so we can store glycogen, and that will actually help balance out blood sugar if you need it. We have stored glycogen in the muscle, but that muscle is the only tissue that can use that stored energy. It's very local. That's why exercise, for example, is really powerful, especially we were talking about doing resistance training or sprinting. So Carol Bike, ARX, they actually tap into the glycolytic energy systems. When we're contracting our muscles, we're pulling a lot of the energy directly from the muscle, and we deplete it. And that's very important energy. That's our survival energy, our fight or flight energy. So the body, what it'll do is signal the body to release stored fat, and it will actually convert that and recharge the glycogen stores. That's one reason, weight training is more effective for weight loss when you're looking at exercise as part of the equation, and sprinting. are much more effective because it actually triggers that mechanism. When you do cardio, you're really relying on blood sugar. And so you'll get hungry. People doing constant cardio are going to get hungrier. But somebody who's metabolically flexible will actually tap into their fat stores more easily to maintain that blood glucose level. And they'll use a fat cell is a triglyceride. And so that's 3 free fatty acids that are bound by something called a glycerol. So it's a chemical bond. And when your liver breaks it apart to use it for energy, those free fatty acids are usable for creating energy. But then those 2 glycerol molecules join to make 1 molecule of glucose. That's gluconeogenesis. And so we're constantly trying to stay balanced because you need some blood sugar in there, but it's really about 90 calories that you need totally systemically floating around in your blood of glucose. And you eat, a bunch of starch and you're getting way more than that. And so that excess stuff, it's not or climbing a mountain or working in a field, then you might use that readily available. So what happens is you get this constant insulin trying to fill the cells up with the sugar, and over time that becomes insulin resistant. The body's like, man, no, stop. And so what does your pancreas do? No, yes, we need to actually process this. So it makes more insulin. And now you're working way harder biologically. And eventually that exhausts. And, when the cells are pushing back, that's insulin resistance that eventually turns into diabetes. Did I go off on a left-wing tangent there? But
a useful one, though.
Yeah. And so really most people really are understanding that blood sugar balance is critical for weight loss. And when people have very rapid effective weight loss when they go ketogenic, which is less than 50 grams of carbohydrates or sugars a day. I see people very, very successful when they're under 150 grams a day. And, most people are way above 300 grams a day in carbohydrates. So what's going to happen? They're going to gain weight over time. And it's that slow, insidious weight gain. And you can't out exercise that. That's what I always tell people. You just can't out exercise that. It doesn't work. I have lots of friends to this day that continue to grow their waistline. And they're like, I'll just run more. I'm like, yeah, that worked for you in your 20s because your metabolism was working so much better, right? That it kind of kept up with the demand, and now it's just eroded. And let me tell you, that running ain't helping.
Mm-hmm.
You're just hungry all the time. And you actually end up, people doing a lot of cardio will end up eating more calories. And you'll crave fast ones because you're going to want to raise that glucose level up.
That makes sense.
So just because I don't think I can ever stay away from not having a piece of good bread, especially if you're like eating pasta and have a slice of Italian bread.
Double whammy there.
Isn't that a lot? My husband is Italian. He makes really great marinara sauce from scratch.
Hey, have you ever tried zoodles? So you can make zucchini noodles. I'm really a fan of the high protein, like chickpea and lentil noodles. If you're really wanting that kind of, the composition of that, they're very tasty. Barilla makes one it's got 20 grams of protein per serving. So now it's more satiating and it's a great upgrade. And I don't think you're going to miss the texture. Because they're pretty good. So there are alternatives to that. That makes sense. But notice how your body feels when you eat that food. You're gonna pump tons of triglycerides. And in Italy, my mom's Italian. And in Italy, they don't eat piles of pasta. It's usually like a little handful on the side with a steak and a salad and some vegetables. It's the American versions of what Italian looks like, which is very different.
It's all pasta because it's all profit.
And the pasta that they have, Europe has been really strict with their food policy, and they have not allowed genetically modified grains and wheats there. It's structurally different. These old grains that we don't get here, that people aren't eating here. I've talked to people that have gluten sensitivity, but go to Germany or go to Italy and they have bread there and it doesn't bug them. And think about the breads that they often made there. So these ryes or pumpernickels, these they ferment their dough. So traditionally things like sourdough, and a lot of people are very successful by making their own sourdough bread. And there are more enzymes there, and they see less of a blood sugar spike, that kind of thing. So, again, moving towards that traditional way of preparation that people did for a long time, that probably functioned better for our digestion and just overall.
Yeah, I did go through a little phase where I found a bunch of zucchini recipes, which were good. I mean, one was zucchini lasagna, where the sliced zucchini replaced the grain noodles and stuff like that. And so it still did come out flavorful and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I do have some zucchini recipes.
I made zucchini enchiladas a bunch in the past. We do all the same things and just remove the corn tortillas, but we would use a mandolin and slice the zucchini very thin. Then we'd bake it in the oven to get rid of the water, and then just layer that. And we did lasagna that way too. So there's some alternative kind of ways to do it. There are also these sea vegetable noodles that are zero carb, and they're actually texturally really close. And
really interesting. They don't have really any flavors.
They don't.
So you can just
the flavor that you're mixing it with. So
yeah.
carbonara with that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Very interesting. Something I could add about habits. So this program is really great at bringing out some, making us more aware about what we're doing in our lives. And I think about bread for me specifically. And I stopped doing gluten in bread about 7-8 years ago now. And at this point, I characterize myself, I identify as somebody that doesn't eat bread. I still eat bread occasionally. I'm at a restaurant or something and it's like there's a really good piece of bread and some olive oil and stuff. I'll have a little bit and I'm like, yeah, that was pretty good. But because I don't identify as even eating bread at this point, I don't crave it at all. And I'm like, it's not even that special. And I was watching an interview with Peter Attia and this author, I can't remember the name of the author. So it has a recent book out called Atomic Habits. And
James Clear.
James Clear. Okay. So the concept he was talking about is exactly that. He was talking about how it can take a lot of time to develop a new habit. It might take 21 days. It might take a year. But it's a lot faster and a lot easier when you instead of saying, I am giving up bread for this month, or I don't eat bread because it's bad for me or something. It's you change that to be like, I'm not someone that eats that, or what would a healthy person do? Make the decisions all around like what would a healthy person do, and then pretty soon I am a healthy person. I don't do that. Yeah. As the natural, easy choice.
Restructuring the way that you're framing it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And even that I can't have this is frictiony in the brain.
Yeah.
So even just identifying in that way, or saying I choose not to because I am a healthy person, and that's really a hierarchy of choice. It does something taste so good that I would trade my well-being for it. I've talked to a lot of people that are not going to give up their soda and not going to give up their, McDonald's because I can't do that. And that's just a choice, really. And, but they still are kind of in a friction because they don't want to be unhealthy either, but yet they're choosing something, right? I'm choosing this, and it's in conflict to really what my value is, which is to be healthy. And so Peter Attia he kind of frames himself as a longevity physician. I think he has a background in cardiology too.
Yeah.
I think you come as a cardiologist, and a lot of cardiologists are actually really on this type of eating right now because they see the impact on heart health and weight and all these things. And they're these are legitimate people that want to help others, and they're kind of shedding some of the dogmatic stuff. And some of them, Uratia is all over it, and he's a longevity specialist. That's actually what his practice is around now.
Yeah.
And James Clear stuff is excellent. That book, Atomic Habits, really gives you insight in how we behave. It's just, we're predictable. Our behaviors are incredibly predictable.
Mm-hmm.
And once you understand the mechanisms, then you can use that to your advantage to kind of basically hack yourself into follow through with effort. And, I'll actually forward this week. I'll share. So there's a great article that he wrote, and the idea of marginal gains is a concept that he ties. A small action taken repeatedly turns into a big thing. And that's a big theme in that book. That's how you actually gain motivation. Motivation comes after behavior. It doesn't come before. A lot of people are going, tomorrow I'll start eating better. I'm going to be more motivated. Well, no, you got to start eating better now, and then motivation will come behind that. That's where the entropy is. Like what Dan was talking about is framing things to help you get past that friction or the habit.
Yeah.
The other.
Yeah.
So-
doing one thing like making your bed releases dopamine and creates motivation to do the next thing.
Exactly.
So do something easy, check it off the list and get the ball rolling,
Yeah. Well, I'll share a little thing that I created, which is an action checklist. And like when I'm coaching somebody, may start with one action. I have somebody right now that's really struggling, and I'm like, you're going to walk for 5 minutes every day, and you're going to walk breathing deeply outside. And that's all you're going to do for a week. And you're just going to come to your little list and go, I did it.
Awesome. Yeah.
And then the following week, we'll do something else. We're going to add a little bit more to it. I mean, this is an interesting case, but it's just that simple. And what's funny is in a year, this person's going to have a list of things that they've probably adopted and swapped for other behaviors. And she'll be going, wow, I really did accomplish a lot this year. It's crazy.
It hasn't been that difficult to for me to be able to go to sleep with my mouth shut. It's kind of developing a new routine, but it really wasn't that difficult to do. The fasting end, like after the 3 weeks, I generally I've heard, like don't eat after 8 o'clock and things like that. But what do you recommend? Like, I know we've talked about the 10 o'clock in the morning or the noon. Is that the fasting schedule that should be maintained?
So
or where does it fall?
There are a lot of variables there, So I think, it depends where you are. If you're in a phase where you want to lose more weight, or you're that's your goal, I think doing 5 days a week could be good. A little bit more of that kind of compressing the calories into a smaller window. Once you've reached your goal weight, the 5-2 model works really well for a lot of people. It's like, 5 days a week, you still eat breakfast and so forth. I think always not eating later in the evening because it's a resource drain. It doesn't allow your body to go into that recovery and repair is a good idea. But there are some evidence that having that first meal early actually helps set up your hormones for the day. It helps spare muscle. So there's some values there. And as we age, we're getting a little older. Sometimes you don't want to fast all the time. It can mess with your testosterone levels a little bit. And I've been playing with that as I've gotten a little older. I used to fast every day. It was every day. I ate probably in a 6 to 8 hour window. It worked great. And then I started noticing that maybe there's some energy things going on. So I would eat breakfast a couple of times a week, and that seemed to feel better. So it's kind of also listening to your body a little bit, but I think a couple of days a week would be a great strategy.
Because I wake up at 6 in the morning.
Uh-huh.
So it just kind of depends. I've tried to be eating later, like, 9, 10 o'clock, it's kind of worked out.
Mhm.
It just depends how I feel that day, what kind of hunger pains I have, whatever. Generally, I don't feel the need before 8 o'clock.
Mhm.
With that. So it's just, I guess when you develop the routines, your body kind of adjusts.
Yeah.
And it's not as much a struggle as it is in the first, 4 to 6 days to do something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people like Peter Attia, for example, that physician that Dan mentioned, he likes to do 48-hour fasts sometimes, maybe once a month or once a year. He's enjoyed that because they've used medical fasting for a long time. Johns Hopkins uses it, and they've seen that tissue repairs itself. Like they've seen tears in basically the little sac that your brain hangs out in, and that are very difficult to repair. And they've put people on medically supervised fast for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and that tissue actually heals. And they use water and they use some electrolytes to kind of maintain heart health and so forth. But what happens is the body really prioritizes resources on repair. And it's also fasting. That fasting document that I created had a lot of structures. It has different time windows that you could do, like, hey, I prefer to eat early in the day and then shut it down at 2. That might be useful for some folks. I put some caveats for women. Women tend to do okay in 10-hour eating windows, and that may support their hormonal health a little bit better than men tend to function better with 6 to 8 hour windows. And that's because of our hormone profile. And it kind of, thinking back into history, hunter-gatherers, what it might have looked like, our roles were often, based on that. You had a baby, you probably were caretaking it. There was probably more opportunity for food, but people out gathering or hunting may not have eaten, that often. And so there might have been a genetic pressure or tolerance based on those kind of roles. But I think playing with it a little bit, I like, what's easy. The reason I suggest is just waiting later in the day to do it. It tends to be the easiest way to get the fast in, because you're bookending not eating too late, and then you're sleeping for a period of time. That's a big block where you don't have to think about food. It's all cool. And then you wake up and see if you can roll into that a little bit longer, and then you can get that bigger window with less strain.
Yeah, because basically I'm a 10 to 8 window. I go to bed at 10 10 to 6, and then I wake up at 6.
Okay.
So that's pretty regular.
8 hours sleep, and you can book in 4 hours on either end, and you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
And you're eating your first meal, you're done by 6.
Yeah, like I'll probably
eat
I'll probably eat after this, and if I have anything else, I may have a little bowl of fruit before 8 o'clock, and and then that'll probably be it. So on Sunday, will you be cooking for us one of those Tulane meals?
You could look those up. That's fun. That's actually not a bad idea. Someday, maybe when we do one of these, we would have a cooking segment. My wife and I about that a lot of folks have never gotten trained on how to cook there, or even go shopping. How do you shop in the supermarket? It's all these foods, you're calling my name, making health claims, and but because that can be a drain. I know you're retired right now. For a lot of busy people, it's like, I don't know how to put a meal together. It takes me hours. I can walk in and I can have a meal on the table for our family 15 to 20 minutes from scratch, just because I have the right stuff in the pantry. And I did send pantry lists. I think we sent out pantry lists, just how you can prep and stock so that you have those things. And then, like I said, if you have a little repertoire, what we'll do is I'll link a boatload of recipes that I already have. I suggested, Nom Nom Paleo and Against All Grain. There are a ton of recipes there, but I have a bunch that I've broken down, like breakfast bowls and, no grain, no pasta, that kind of stuff.
Well, there's one thing someone mentioned one time, and it does kind of work. I mean, we don't have difficulty cooking here. We kind of enjoy it. We rarely go out to eat. But one of the things is they said when you get your groceries, go wash all your vegetables right away and stuff, because that takes away from prep time later, because you're saying, oh, I gotta wash this stuff, I gotta do this stuff before I do it, whatever. But if you do it, then you're gonna be more liable for a snack to grab a carrot or a piece of celery and things like that too.
Yeah.
And if you develop that routine, you can eat a little healthier.
Yeah, so food prep. Food prepping is actually a really skillful thing to do. It's, a lot of people will do their food prep on a Sunday. Well, they'll kind of pre-cook a lot of things. Like I'm going to pressure cook some chicken, and I'm going to chop some vegetables and have those ready to go. And so you have the raw elements to put meals together.
Well, sometimes I know what people have done. I mean, especially if people are working, you can make a big pot of soup and then portion some in Ziploc bags and freeze it.
Yep.
And then have that for a meal, and you don't have to prepare anything other than, thaw it and boil it on there. So, yeah, I mean, there's some time-saving things you can do to eat healthier.
Absolutely.
Because I can't cook for one. It doesn't work, and it's kind of expensive.
Yeah, it's challenging. Again, that's where it comes in. You can make bigger portions of things and then break it down. Like one of the things I do is I will pressure cook chicken so that it's shredded. And now that can be, lettuce wrap taco. It can be on a salad. I can mix it with hard boiled eggs. And, there are lots of different variations that you can do with that. I make like a big pot of quote unquote chili, might be like a taco kind of seasoned thing. And that could be on a salad. It could be in a lettuce rack. I mean, a lot of different things that we can do.
Yeah, that's great.
And so there's variations on the theme. I like centering, making sure we talked a little bit about the protein intake. I'll emphasize that a little bit more. I think that's critical. Protein's the most satiating macronutrient. It's the one that's going to fill you up the most because it's so nutritiously dense.
Yeah, because I've been doing salad almost once a day. Again, I've put cooked chicken on it. I've put hard boiled eggs, in it. I mean, there's just things that you could take the salad and add a protein to it. That way.
That's a great strategy. We have romaine and typically arugula, are the ones that we like, and you can dress that up in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, because there's even stuff pre-made that it's spinach, it's kale, it might be 4 different blends or something. So you get a little bit of variety out there too. So
yeah, all good strategies.
Yeah, I really got away from eating lettuce. I've done some of the things you said you've eaten instead, and and done that, because I mean, basically lettuce is it's water, isn't it?
It's fiber and water and some minerals.
But does it have less nutrients than other, like spinach or arugula or kale or whatever?
Yeah, they might have a little bit more concentration of one nutrient or another, but I would put them all kind of in similar categories.
So
I like things like arugula, and I like butter lettuce, those kinds, a little bit more than spinach, for example. A lot of people are reactive. It's goitrogenic, so it could actually affect your thyroid in a negative way. But I have spinach sometimes. It's not my go-to.
yeah. Well, I'm really hungry now.
Well, it's about time we wrap up, I think.
Over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any last minute questions? Or anything you want to add, Jose?
I think, I'm proud of everyone. They're doing it. And I think you
Yeah.
guys they're showing up are making the effort, and that's where it's at. It's not about being perfect. So just keep going on that. Just little consistent efforts, and that turns into something bigger. Give yourself a break. It doesn't have to be about being perfect. This isn't supposed to be suffrage. Bringing an attitude of curiosity and kind of excitement and playfulness can be helpful in these endeavors. We get so serious about stuff sometimes, and it is serious stuff, our health and well-being, but also keeping it light a little bit, I think, helps with the mental friction.
Yeah.
Right. It's not as dire, oh my gosh, I messed up today. That's okay. It's like I'm doing something to bring my health to a higher level, and I think that's valuable.